Welcome to Steph's Foodie Finds. A little food, a little wellness. Listen in and experience a podcast where food and personal development come together. Now, here's your host, Stephanie Magsino.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Steph's Foodie Finds. How are you all doing today? That's a legit question. I really mean it. How are you? How are you feeling today? I'll be honest with you. I was very sluggish for the past several days. I don't know if it's because of the change in weather. And for me personally, I always feel sensitive to whatever's happening outside of me. So if the weather is going to be great, I'm usually in an awesome mood. If it's chilly, cold, and dreary, I tend to be more recluse. But, that is, I think, the way of many people, to be honest with you. But I don't let that really dictate or determine the rest of how my day goes. So I start off sluggish, but I like to finish, really well. So today's topic, I feel like, is super important and really difficult sometimes for people to actually address. We are discussing red flags today. Now, obviously, I am not a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. So I had to do some research, and good old trusty Google helped me do a lot of the research. But I wanted to take some information that was relevant and pretty much spot on in terms of how I see things as well. But that gives me a little bit of reassurance knowing that I'm on the right path. And I truly hope that this information that I share with you that I found will somehow give you some insight, a little bit of more self-awareness, and just that recognition of knowing how much more we have to learn, evolve, and grow as humans, and how much we need to improve our interpersonal skills and our relationships with other human beings, whether that has to do with work, whether that has to do with family, whether that has to do with, friendships, your romantic relationships, and your future relationships. I feel like we're all at this crossroads where we're trying to just navigate through post-pandemic life and all the other shit that's happening outside of us, whether it's politics or science and COVID and vaccine and la 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 la. We can go on and on and on, but I think at the end of the day, it's really important to be able to hone in and try to fix and improve our interpersonal and interrelationship skills and how we attach certain things to how we treat other people and how we treat ourselves. So, with all of that in mind, if you go to www.verywellmind.com, there is an article written by Wendy Rose Gould and medically reviewed by Rachel Goldman, PhD, FTOS. And this article was released on August 12th, 2021. And I'm going to share and read some excerpts, about red flags. So let's just start off with the basics. People talk a lot about red flags in relationships, but what does that term mean exactly? Are all red flags the same for everyone? And are they a reason to walk away? Or does it ever make sense to address the red flag and mend the relationship? Now, this article will answer those questions and also outline some of the most common red flags in relationships to be aware of. What are red flags? Throughout all contexts, the term red flag signifies a reason to stop. Red flags are thrown in sports when a game is halted because of a foul, and they are waved on race car tracks when conditions are too dangerous to continue down the road. Red lights signal us to stop our vehicles on the road, and red tape cautions us from going beyond a certain point. In relationships, red flags are signs that the person probably can't have a healthy relationship, and proceeding down the road together would be emotionally dangerous, as explained by Dr. Wendy Walsh, who is a PhD, a clinical psychologist who specializes in relationships. Note that red flags in a relationship might not be obvious. While some are very clear, many might present more as a clue or a hint that there's an underlying problem. Also, it can take some time for a red flag to present itself in a relationship. Now, I think that is so true. Most of us don't necessarily see the red flags right away. Whether it's because you're infatuated or blinded or you're clueless, or maybe that person is showing you their best self in the beginning stages of getting to know someone or a relationship, a friendship, a career, relationship. Everyone kind of shows their best foot forward in the initial phases of most relationships. So there's another part of this article that they discuss, and it's to also acknowledge that it's not just the red flags. There are also what we know as yellow flags. So it's important to understand the difference between a red flag and a yellow flag. Ultimately, red flags indicate a reason to cease or back away from a relationship, while yellow flags are less severe and instead caution us to slow down. Often, yellow flags vary according to your personal needs and wants in a relationship, while a red flag is more universal in nature. That is very, very true. For example, a yellow flag might include difficulty with emotional communication that the person is aware of and working on. And a red flag might be someone with a history of domestic violence, chronic cheating, or substance abuse. Okay. Then this article basically dives into the 10 flags we all need to be aware of. And this is where I think we have to be aware of these. We just have to be open to recognizing when we see this. Okay? So some of them are pretty self-explanatory, and some of them maybe need a little bit more guidance. So the first one is alcoholism and drug addiction. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. If that is somehow impacting your partner's life in a negative way, be it in their work life, health, relationship, that's a sign of addiction, obviously. So if they rely on substances to get through the day or week or a tough situation, obviously that means they haven't really figured out a way to cope without altering, their mental capacity and state. So that's I feel like that's a no-brainer. The second red flag, violent displays. Someone who demonstrates violence towards you, loved ones, strangers, and even animals is a serious red flag. It indicates they have not developed a healthy way to properly channel their emotions. And in some cases, it could be indicative they lack empathy for others. So they also give the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It is 1-800-799-7233. It is huge to understand, and it's so serious for all of us to also comprehend that if we see a loved one or anyone that is being victimized by domestic violence, that is that is a that is red flag without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, all parties involved need help. Third red flag, mismatched relationship goals. This one I feel like is very relevant to many people that I know. Dr. Walsh says that if your relationship goals are at odds, this could be a sign that it's time to walk away. While this is less of a red flag in the sense it's a personal issue to work on, it is a red flag for the future of your relationship. The future of the relationship. Just think about it. You stick it through to get through the present time, but does that mean that person and that relationship will be healthy for you in your future? Something to think about. If they say, for instance, that they'll never get married, but that's something you personally desire, you have to believe them. You can't somehow convince yourself that you will be able to sway and change their mind. Okay? Or another example. Your partner says, "I don't think I want to have kids." You have the responsibility to hold yourself accountable to really understand that you should take their word for it and you cannot change their mind. You probably will think to yourself, "Oh, well, maybe if we're together long enough, maybe he or she will change their mind about having kids. Maybe if I do this and give them so much love and show them all of the five, um, signs of showing love and your love language and that person's love language, that they will come around and change their mind." That's probably not going to happen. And I have to agree with Dr. Wendy Walsh. Other misaligned relationship goals include where you want to live, whether you want to have children, like we just talked about, and how you plan to tackle finances. Another big one. Okay, next red flag, persistent jealousy and distrust. Another common red flag is jealousy and distrust. Often, the red flag of a very insecure partner looks like attentiveness at the start of a relationship, but there's an underlying control problem beneath all the attention. Later in the relationship, it's easier to look back and reinterpret that constant attention or overboard generosity as desperate insecurity. Oy, I think that was well said and nothing else to add to that. Another red flag, history of infidelity. Relationships require trust to succeed. If your partner has a history of infidelity, it's important to proceed with caution. Even if your partner has demonstrated change, you must ask yourself if you feel comfortable pursuing the relationship knowing they have a history of cheating. Some people may not be bothered by this, but if you are, then you must recognize this factor will affect your ability to trust your partner completely down the road. I have to agree with that. And if any of you know of the Angry Therapist on social media, he actually just recently also chimed in on this. If you forgive right now, this present moment, your partner for cheating, but somewhere down the future, whether it's a day, 2 days, 10 days, 10 years, 15 years down the road, and then you throw it back in their face for cheating on you, does that really mean you have forgiven them? Does that mean no, obviously not. You didn't keep your word. You did not come clean with yourself, number 1. You didn't come clean with yourself of being able to let go and move on and forgive. So that in itself is wrong. That means you're sticking around because you think that that person's going to change and you're hoping they're going to change, but in yourself, you haven't changed your mindset. So I know it sounds crazy, but you will, as the person who got victimized, you will have to be the one to forgive, not just the person who did the cheating, but forgive yourself, because I think it's going to be a very difficult road to be able to say you forgive that person for cheating on you, but have you really? Or will you really? Or will you be that type of person who's going to throw it in their face down the road that, oh my God, you cheated on me. So I have all this reason to be, still angry, hurt, and upset. Well, that means you haven't really been able to trust your partner completely. So you really have to be honest with yourself. So don't deny yourself your truth, even if it's scary. You need to be really honest with yourself. Another red flag, controlling nature. Oh, God. A partner who is controlling in any way likely has deep personal issues they must work on. Rethink your relationship if your partner tries to control who you see, who you talk to, where you go, how you spend your money, what you do online, what your body looks like, what you eat, what you wear, if they're going through your phone, if they're going through your gadgets, or if you are the one who's doing all of that, you need to basically tell yourself, whoops, I'm the red flag, or whoops, that person is showing me a red flag. For real. For real. Hold yourself accountable if you are recognizing this in yourself. You got to recognize your own toxic mindsets and behaviors. It's not fair for the victim to always hold you accountable. You got to start holding yourself accountable too. Another red flag, stories of the crazy exes. Talking about old flames is common, especially when you're first starting to date someone new. But do pay attention to the language your partner uses when discussing those they've dated in the past. This sort of perspective deflects any responsibility and demonstrates a lack of respect for the people they once cared for and loved. Okay, in last week's podcast episode, I think I had addressed a first date that I had with someone, and we were having dinner in a really nice place in West Hartford. And one of the first things my date had mentioned was that his recent ex-girlfriend is in rehab for drug rehab, and that he was still very much in love with her. I don't know about you, but that's a effing red flag right there. I mean, I probably should have, in hindsight, just walked out of that date, but I have too much self-respect, and I'm too much of a person to have. I would never want anyone to do that to me. So I just think about karma. So I just think that about that story and that experience that I had. And it's a red flag for sure, because I can guarantee you that guy is somehow, still on and off with that ex-girlfriend. And good for him if he's able to, handle and cope in a healthier way. It says here, if a potential mate describes their exes as crazy instead of taking 50% of the responsibility for any craziness that may have existed in past relationships, there's a good chance you could become the next quote unquote crazy ex. That is 100% accurate. Another red flag, no friends. If your partner struggles to make and maintain relationships, then that could definitely indicate you will also struggle to connect with them. Try to understand why your partner has struggled to build connections with others. If you discover a deflection, no personal culpability, or lack of drive, then you will likely experience the same treatment in your relationship. Oh boy. Another red flag, they give you all of their time. Now, this red flag can sometimes tie into the last one. When a partner doesn't have other relationships, hobbies, or goals, that is a recipe for an unhealthy, unfulfilling relationship. Now, when each party has its own sense of self, ding, 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 it can enrich your individual selves and your bond. If someone relies on you entirely and always for their sense of happiness and entertainment, then that can lead to feelings of suffocation, resentment, and unhappiness. Another red flag, lack of emotional intimacy. Oh my God, this is such a effing big one for me. One of the best parts of being in a romantic relationship is connecting deeply and authentically with the other person. For some, emotional intimacy is challenging, but it should always be the goal. A partner who shows no interest in opening up and bonding is a death knell for a relationship. I think that's self-explanatory. Another red flag. So, if this list hasn't told you it's pretty exhausting, there are many, 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 many others. But as I've been saying in previous podcasts, and I will say that this article does end with the same suggestion and words of wisdom that I've been giving. And that is trust your gut. Trust your instincts. When you have that pit in your stomach that's making you second guess yourself, question something, give you that queasy feeling, you're not sure, you get a pit in your stomach, you kind of get a headache, you get like this ball in your throat, any physicality of your body that feels like it's reacting towards something you just recognized, whether it's a yellow flag or a red flag, it's best for you to try to read into that. Don't ignore them. It's super important not to ignore your gut intuition. Your intuition is literally always going to send you in the right direction. You fighting it, you fighting your intuition is really also a red flag in itself because it means that you're not listening to you. If you just believed in your intuition and that true core feeling of knowing what was right and wrong for you, I think you would be in a better place. Your level of decision making in a much better place. And it might make some sense to just, before you make big decisions, take the time to really think about things, weigh out the pros and cons. If you're in a jam and you need to be making a decision real quick, for example, like that time when I went on that first date and decided never again. That was completely my gut intuition. That was all gut work. And it should make it easier for any of you to walk away from situations like that when you recognize a red flag. You listen to your intuition. And if you're ever really struggling, I mean this, if you ever really struggle in knowing what you should do, what to do in any situation, I really believe in doing the self work by seeing a therapist. Speaking with a therapist is going to lead you into the right direction. Therapists are there to help. So, I know that's a lot of information from this awesome article. Like I said, you can find it on www.verywellmind.com. 10 red flags in relationships. Are red flags a reason to walk away from someone? And the article again by Wendy Rose Gold, medically reviewed by Rachel Goldman, PhD, FTOS. And that concludes today's episode. It's a lot of information, but I think it's really, really important for all of us to trust ourselves. We are now in a world where there's just so much going on, and everyone's got a different version of what's right and wrong because we're all individuals. But like I said, trust your intuition, whether it's related to dating, first dates, dating on these Tinder and Bumble and Hinge apps, or whether it has to do with, job, related issues with a coworker or a toxic manager or whatever it is, or toxic people within your own family, toxic people within your group of friends. I can go on, but reading red flags, knowing when to walk away, super important for your safety emotionally, mentally, and physically. And if you really care about yourself and that partner or your loved one involved in this kind of relationship, get help. Therapy's the way to go. So on that note, I am leaving you guys with some awesome, hopefully awesome takeaways. And even though we didn't get to do any foodie stuff on this episode, I think it's really important that we start talking about the things that are really difficult to talk about. So thank you again for listening. I hope you guys tune in again for next week's episode. But until then, bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to follow Steph's Foodie Finds on YouTube and be sure to hit like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode of Steph's Foodie Finds. Until next time, eat well and be well.